Γεια σας. Welcome to Greek Like Me, the podcast about all things Greek. I'm your host, Pamela Deodes-Wood. Email us at stealthgreek@gmail.com to share comments, questions, and stories about Greekness, or your own ethnic background. Long live Greece, Zito η Ελλάδα, and Slava Ukraine. Heads up, there will be some brief mentions of violence and essay in this episode. It's March, a big month in the Greek calendar and in the Orthodox Christian calendar. In 2025, Lent began on the 3rd with Clean Monday. Sunday of Orthodoxy was celebrated March 9th. Sunday of the Holy Cross on the 23rd. But the biggest celebration of the month is March 25th, when Orthodox Christians observe one of the 12 great feasts of the Church, the feast day of the Annunciation of the Theotokos, the Mother of God. And on the same day, we celebrate Greek independence from 400 years of Ottoman rule. The two celebrations coinciding is not by chance. It was a deliberate effort by the new Greek government in the 1830s to inextricably connect the day representing the salvation of man with the date that triggered the emancipation of the Greek people. The Annunciation is presented in the Gospels, Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38. The teenaged Mary is visited by the Archangel Gabriel, who tells her she's been chosen to become the mother of the Son of God, who is the Savior of mankind. It is the moment of the Incarnation when God becomes man in the form of Jesus. It's the fulfillment of the prophecies from the Old Testament when God promises the coming of the Messiah. The emphasis in the Orthodox Church is on Mary's faith and her willingness to follow the will of God. She's second only to Jesus as a revered figure in the religion, and her faith and sacrifice has always been an inspiration to Orthodox Christians, as it was for the Greek people under the Ottoman rule. Tassos Kokkinidis sums it up in an article about the 25th in Greek Reporter. The feast day celebrates God's action in entering the human world as Jesus in order to save humanity, and humanity's acceptance of God's will in Mary's freely given acceptance of the role of Mother of God. Reverend Nikondi Patranikos, in a Dictionary of Greek Orthodoxy, tells us that the first evidence in writing that the Annunciation was celebrated as a feast day was in 624. It had likely been celebrated for some years before. Normally, there's not a lot of celebrating going on during Great Lent. It is a solemn preparation for the Passion of Jesus. There are several church services every week. Daily prayer is encouraged. Weddings and baptisms, along with any major partying or feasts, are discouraged until after Easter. Palm Sunday is an exception, and so is the Annunciation, or Evangelismos, because of the supreme importance of God's gift and Mary's sacrifice. March 25th is extra special, combining the Blessed Feast Day with the liberation of our people. TheHolyArt.org reminds us it is a day to reflect on the importance of faith, obedience, and sacrifice, as well as the strength and resilience of the Greek people. The Greeks, like many other ethnic groups, were conquered by the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century in a murderous rampage used to quell and subjugate the people. The Greeks mounted repeated rebellions and insurrections scattered over the 400-year occupation. They engaged in sabotage, and some became brigands in the mountains, harassing and robbing passing Turkish merchants or emissaries of the empire. The Ottoman MO for dealing with religious regions or villages included burning the villages and their churches to the ground, often with the male and elderly inhabitants confined inside before the church was torched. Women and children who were not immediately killed were often sexually assaulted, then killed, or sold into slavery. But Greeks could become targets at any moment, for any reason. Villages were razed, their populations wiped out if the government or a powerful local citizen was displeased. Women and girls were regularly stolen to populate the harems of the Sultan or any number of local governors or officials of the empire, or sold on open slave markets in the cities. Young boys were taken, converted to Islam, and raised to serve in the Ottoman army, ultimately sometimes attacking their own people, their own villagers. The Greek people suffered and died, were enslaved or spared according to the whims of local officials, and rebellions continued to flare. In 1814, the Filiki Eteria, the Society of Friends or Friendly Company, was organized by the educated upper crust of Greek society, those whose families were merchants with businesses that were allowed to prosper during the occupation, and those families were able to send their sons to Europe for schooling. Some of these sons became commissioned officers in the Russian, British, or French armies. Some became clergy. Some successfully took over their father's businesses. Their only purpose in the organization was to plot liberation for Greece. One of the members of the Filiki Eteria was Metropolitan Palion Patron Germanos of Patras, who became a central figure of the fight for independence and the catalyst binding the great feast day with the start of the revolution. Palion Patron translates to Old Protector. He was the religious and revolutionary leader guiding the people under his spiritual care. The Metropolitan is the head of an ecclesiastical province and all of the churches within it, with a rank higher than a bishop, but is still under the direction of an archbishop, who would in turn answer to the patriarchate. Germanos traveled between churches and provinces in his capacity as a prelate, at times conspiring and plotting with his fellow revolutionaries. Along with ecclesiastical instructions, he would pass information and strategy for resistance along to other clergy members. Some of the surviving documents of the Filiki Eteria indicate the Greek fight for independence was planned from the beginning to ignite on March 25th in order to take advantage of the symbolism of the Annunciation in galvanizing the people. The reasoning was, on this major feast day, churches would be packed with the faithful. Church services were permitted in the Ottoman Empire. Any other large gatherings of Greeks would arouse suspicion and be dispersed. But in the church, where no one would question a crowd on a holy day, revolutionary leaders, including priests, could easily address the rebellious Greeks and foment revolution. But in February and early March 1821, skirmishes were already breaking out throughout the Greek mainland and some of the islands. According to W. Allison Phillips, in his 1897 history, The War of Greek Independence, the people rose up in early March. Documents written by eyewitnesses and the Ottoman government record the March 13th blockade of Ottoman ships at Nafplion by Lascarina Bubalina, merchant, shipowner, captain of our own fleet of ships, hero of the revolution, who raised the rebel flag at the start of the operation. Our two-part Bubalina episode dropped in April of 2024. The legend shared by Greeks today, taught to students and promoted by the Greek government, is that Metropolitan Palion Patron Germanos of Old Patras raised the standard of the revolution on March 25th at the monastery of Ayalavra in Kalavrita in the Peloponnesos. He blessed the revolutionaries who had gathered there, prompting the start of the Greek fight for independence. Various historians dispute that date. There was the February invasion into Moldavia, the uprising of the Maniots, the liberation of Kalamata on March 23rd, and others. As we said, there were a number of uprisings that had begun throughout Greek regions, many centered around the Peloponnesos. The editors of the Greek Revolution, a critical dictionary, Paskalis M. Kitromelidis and Konstantinos Tsorakalas, tell us revolutionary events reached a symbolic climax on March 5th at Patras, where local Archbishop Germanos raised the standard of the revolution and the Greek captains took an oath to either liberate their homeland or die. Some historians cite March 13th at Kalavrita as the momentous occasion of Germanos' patriotic act, the same day Bubalina raised the standard on her flagship. Others insist it was in April that Germanos blessed the flag and the revolutionaries. Phillips claims it was on the second day of April that Germanos, A number of priests and a, quote, wild rabble of peasantry, armed with scythes, clubs, and slings, marched to Patras, where he blessed the flag. Phillips was an English historian who never visited Greece and had a fairly low opinion of the Greek people, which permeates his history. Not unusual for the time, unfortunately. Another Brit, George Finlay, author of History of the Greek Revolution, published in 1861, fought beside Lord Byron, Greek hero, during the Revolution. He writes the revolution was meant to begin on April 6th. Germanos and fellow bishops went to the monastery of St. Laura. There is no monastery of St. Laura. It would be St. Lavra in Kalavrita, which maybe to him sounded like Laura. Finlay tells us, quote, the general opinion in Greece is that on reaching the monastery of St. Laura, they proclaimed the revolution, but he denies that this is the case. He claims the first insurrectional movements took place at the end of March, later pinpointing the 25th, but not as the day of the blessing of the banner. Finlay pins April 4th as the day Germanos arrived in Patras, which is 48 miles, around 77 kilometers from Kalavrita, and that it was April 5th when the Metropolitan performed Divine Liturgy, not at the monastery, but in Kalamata. Quote, and all the Greeks assembled took an oath to deliver their country from the Turks or die in the attempt. Finlay believed the leaders of the revolution were useless, but he respected the Greek people who he'd fought with, saying they never wavered in their strength and determination. From the day they took up arms, they made the victory of the Orthodox Church and the establishment of their national independence the great objects of their existence. I have mixed feelings myself about some of the revolutionary leaders. Some of the elite looked down on the rest of the Greeks, like Phillips with his rabble. Some were beholden to European sponsors. Others were obviously in it for the payday or the power. Their ridiculous infighting, a civil war in the midst of the revolution, nearly cost Greece its independence, and cost the lives of countless patriotic Greeks, including some of their fellow leaders. Story for another day. I read parts of several other 19th century histories of the revolution, some by desk-bound intellectuals, some by men who fought with British troops in the Greek Revolution. The contradictions made my head spin. Samuel Gridley Howe was one of the most famous Americans who fought in the Greek War of Independence. He was a surgeon who soon took charge of battlefield hospitals and later organized humanitarian relief throughout Greece. He fought for the abolition of slavery when he returned to the U.S. Statues in Greece honor his contribution to the war effort. In 1828, Howe wrote an historical sketch of the Greek Revolution. His take on Germanos was that the Metropolitan arrived in Kalavrita on April 4th and suddenly displayed the standard of the cross and called upon the people in the name of God and liberty to take up arms against their oppressors. The people answered his call by a general rush of arms. He continues, the spark was thus struck, mounted into a flame, and spread rapidly over the Morea. Morea is another term for the Peloponnesos in central Greece. I'd like to point out that of the British and Americans who fought in the Greek War of Independence, may their memories be eternal, none of them were actually there when it first started. So they were getting their information second or third hand. And the desk-bound intellectuals, I don't even know where they got their information from. Francois Bouqueville was a French diplomat, physician, and historian whose brother was the French consulate at Patras, which might have given him an in when writing his History of the Greek Revolution, which he published in 1824. I found nearly a dozen, half dozen? I don't know. I found a whole bunch of travelogues of Greece and Turkey in English that he had written, but not his History of the Greek Revolution. Everywhere I looked, it was available only in French or Italian. Je ne parle pas français, or Italian for that matter. I needed to see it in English. But Bouqueville was endlessly quoted and cited by generations of historians, some of whom wrote or were translated into English. Bouqueville wrote that the revolution, quote, had been proclaimed on March 25th by Archbishop of Old Patras Germanos, at the monastery of Ayalavra. Did his brother's position as consulate in Patras give him access to the facts? Or was his strong sympathy for the Greek cause reason for him to promote the symbolism that the Greek leadership had chosen to sustain the fight? I don't know. The critical dictionary cites Bouqueville's claim, but also the claim that the standard of the revolution was blessed in Patras on March 25th, not at Ayalavra. And they cite the suggestion that neither happened on the 25th of March, but became part of the mythology of the revolution. The blessing of the standard never appears to be in doubt, just the date, and occasionally the location. April Kalogeropoulos Householder, editor of the amazing book Bouboulin and the Greek Revolution, says in the introduction, the official date for the start of the Greek Revolution was, quote, written into legislation in 1838, a date that was invented to fuse the national uprising with the Greek Orthodox celebration of the Annunciation, and to reinforce the theme of the birth of the Greek nation. However it happened, Germanos had been Metropolitan of Patras for 15 years before the revolution broke out. He had actively engaged with and encouraged the people of his area of influence to revolt. He'd gathered them into organized groups. The critical dictionary refers to him as a multitasking prelate who was part of the front line of the revolution. The official story. Up to today, the official story is that on March 25th, on the feast of the Annunciation, Paleon Patron Germanos raised a banner with a cross on it at the monastery of Ayalavra and led a group of armed rebels to Patras, singing psalms and promising salvation to those who would fall into battle against the Muslims. And Patras did become a center of Greek rebellion, led in part by Germanos. The moment the banner was raised was immortalized in one of the most famous paintings in Greece, titled The Bishop of Old Patras Germanos Blesses the Flag of the Revolution, 1865, by Theodoros Virzakis. It hangs in the Alexandros Soutsos Museum of the Greek National Gallery. It can be seen on our social media announcement as well as on our sources page on the stealthgreek.com website. Our thanks to the National Gallery for permission to display this iconic painting. Let's pause a minute to talk about the banner, the standard of the Greek Revolution, which ultimately became the standard of the Hellenic Republic. In its first incarnation as the revolutionary banner, it was a blue cross laid over a white background. Before the war was over, it had become a white cross on a blue background. Post-war, a crown popped on and off of the center of the white cross over time, as the monarchy appeared, disappeared, and reappeared. The modern flag of the Hellenic Republic remains blue and white, the national colors of Greece. Blue represents the seas and the sky, and if you've ever seen the seas and skies of Greece, they are the most amazing color of blue. White represents the purity of the struggle for Greek independence. The 9 stripes of the flag alternate blue and white, representing the 9 syllables of the motto of the War of Independence: Eleftheria y Thanatos, freedom or death. The upper corner of the flag is a white cross representing Christianity. There's a reason why the symbol for Christianity is represented on the national flag. The connection to the Annunciation is brought to mind on the 25th, but the church was always a part of the revolution. Christian churches were tolerated in the Ottoman Empire. It was seen as a way to lull people in their despair. But if a church was destroyed by earthquake or fire, or was leveled by the authorities because the inhabitants of a village had displeased the Ottoman governor, it could never be rebuilt. New churches were not allowed to be constructed. That was forbidden. Under Ottoman oppression, Christians, Greeks and Armenians mostly, were taxed at a different rate than other Ottoman citizens. They had fewer rights, and no rights in court at all if it was a Turkish citizen who attacked them or stole from them or even murdered them. Converts were rewarded, but the vast majority of Greeks and Armenians stubbornly stood by their faith, which gave them hope for a better future, along with the priests and rebels continuously plotting liberation. The ridiculous claim of American Christians that they are oppressed has always infuriated me. They have no idea what religious oppression is. I'd like to direct them to Greek Genocide Resource Center, any Holocaust museum, or a Palestinian refugee camp. Siopi se parakalo. St. Andrew Greek Orthodox Church of South Bend, Indiana, perfectly explains the attachment Greeks hold for the persecuted Orthodox Church. Their blog on March 25th states, "During the dark years of the Ottoman Turkish rule, the Greek Orthodox Church helped the enslaved Hellenes to retain the Christian culture, Greek language, and generally the Hellenic identity." I remember my childhood priest, Father George Mamangakis, may his memory be eternal, speaking from the pulpit about how hard it was for the oppressed peoples under Ottoman rule to maintain their pride, their culture, when the oppressors wanted total assimilation. Events in my own country currently are queasily familiar. Let go of your identity and bow down to mine was the Ottoman MO. But the churches, and as Father George was always quick to point out, the faithful and pious yayas kept our heritage and our beliefs alive and a source of pride, even as our ancestors were punished for displaying them. The Critical Dictionary states, two highly symbolic events express the revolutionary will of the Greeks: the raising of the cross as the standard of the revolution by Germanos, and the declaration of Greek independence to the European courts. Whatever the order of events, in 1838, King Otto, yes, you heard me right, King Otto of Greece, he was a Bavarian prince. We'll talk about him in his own episode. King Otto in 1838 declared March 25th the National Day of Greek Independence by royal decree, permanently linking the Feast of the Annunciation with the freedom of Greece. Kokkinidis calls it the big moment that inextricably connected Orthodoxy with the Greek War of Independence. That Germanos, raising a standard containing a cross, quote, signified that this was not only a war of freedom, but also a war of faith. The combined celebration of Annunciation and Independence Day touches every Greek throughout the world. Annunciation is the name day of the many Greeks baptized Evangelos, Evangelia, or Evan, as well as Maria, Mario, Panayota, Panayotis, Theotokis. Name days in Greece are more important than birthdays, with family feasts to celebrate. We celebrate them in the diaspora as well. We always took our kids out to eat on their name days. Pick your restaurant. Imagine your name day also being a major feast day. And the day of Greek independence. Double the pride. There are special services for the Annunciation. It's one of those days when a lot of people show up at church and take communion. After church, there are processions throughout Greece to commemorate the revolution. School children march in parades dressed in traditional Greek clothing, carrying flags. There's a grand military parade at Syntagma Square in Athens, where the changing of the guard takes place. In Cyprus, Australia, the United States, the UK, as well as other countries with sizable Greek communities, there are Independence Day parades, children in traditional costume, buildings in capital cities are lit in the blue and white colors of the Greek flag. There are speeches by local Greek clergy and leaders, and by the non-Greek politicians in major cities. There's music and dancing and muted feasting. Hey, it's still Lent. We fly the Greek flag outside of our homes. And we feel the pride of what our ancestors overcame during 400 years of occupation and 8 years of devastating war. On March 25th, the combined feast day of the Annunciation of Theotokos and Greek Independence Day, Greek Orthodox are excused from the strict fast. They're still fasting, not as strict. It's the 40-day abstinence from all animal products, including dairy, as well as fish with a backbone, and olive oil. Yeah, not an animal product, but a symbol of luxury in ancient times. Annunciation is the only day during Lent besides Palm Sunday when Greek Orthodox break the fast to eat fish. We're still not eating any meat products. Greeks the world over gather as families or communities to eat the traditional bakaliaros, skodolia, a delicious breaded fried codfish with a garlic potato dip. Oh, some Greeks call it the Greek fish and chips. My mouth is watering thinking about it. We've posted links in our episode notes to recipes for making your own celebratory Greek-style codfish dinner. Mwah. Greek City Times calls March 25th a celebration of the revelation of God's love and God's gift, as well as a feast of joy and liberty as we commemorate our Greek fathers and mothers who offered their lives in order to establish freedom for themselves and for their children. End quote. The sacrifice of the Mother of God for the salvation of mankind, and the sacrifices of our ancestors for the liberty of our people to live and worship in freedom. There goes my dog. The Greek Orthodox Archbishop of North America, His Eminence Elpidophoros, like all Greek archbishops the world over, commemorates the day every year in an encyclical, which is read to all the parishes under his authority during the liturgy. In 2022, in a letter that embraced both the joy of freedom and the spirit of rebellion, Elpidophoros said, "The immortal heroes of 1821 raised their flag on the Feast of the Annunciation, as the American colonies did on July 4th, 1776. They made their declaration for independence and went forth to defend themselves against oppression, much as our Ukrainian brethren are doing on this very moment." The Ukrainians are our brethren in Orthodox Christianity. In 2019, His Eminence Bartolomeo, the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, the highest authority in the Orthodox Church as a whole, signed a decree officially recognizing the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, granting it self-government, separating it finally from the Russian Orthodox Church, whose ties to the government of Russia have pushed for the absorption of Ukraine into Russia. The Russian Orthodox Church blessed the war to attack their neighbors and fellow Orthodox Christians. Those priests who protest in Russia there are persecuted. Elpidophoros continued, "This day, the day of the Annunciation and the day of the commencement of the liberation of Greece, is a day when we direct our love and compassion to those who are still fighting for democracy, for freedom, for truth. Today, as we chant our hymn of victory and thanksgiving, we remember our sisters and brothers struggling in Ukraine at this very hour, who are under brutal and inhumane attack by their neighbor, even their fellow Orthodox Christians. When Christians don't act like Christians, we're required by the Gospels to speak out. We at Greek Like Me join Archbishop Elpidophoros in doing so, in Ukraine and in America, in honor of our forefathers, both Greek and American. Our Greek ancestors, who proclaimed their support for other oppressed people, including enslaved people in the United States, would have cheered this encyclical, urging us to show solidarity with those pushing back against oppression, even as they are currently betrayed by one of their strongest allies. We're seeing dark days in Ukraine and in the United States, as once again leaders of stronger countries, driven by greed and inhumanity, fight to destroy the will and the faith of other people's right to freedom. Greece has already made it plain she stands with Ukraine and has been threatened by Russia because of it. But Greeks have never been afraid to take on the big boys. Our Greek ancestors shine a beacon onto the path of righteousness, liberty, and justice. Long live Greece, Zito I Alava, and Slava Ukraine. Thanks for listening. Greek Like Me is a Stealth Greek production. This episode was researched, written, and narrated by me, your host, Pamela Diodes Wood. Our producer, photographer, and post-production editor is Douglas John. Our thanks again to the National Gallery in Athens for permission to post the Vrizakis painting of Metropolitan Yamanos raising the banner of the revolution. Visit our website at stealthgreek.com for resources, photos, links, and more. Please, I know it's annoying, please rate, like, and subscribe. It helps us get noticed so we can keep making content about Greeks and Greek culture. I apologize, one of my dogs keeps barking. Find Greek Like Me on YouTube. And we're on Facebook and on Instagram at Greek_like_me. See you next time. Yes. and Kronjopola to everyone celebrating Annunciation, his name day.